I stared at my phone, reading the text message for the third time. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from something else entirely. Donated your grandmother's quilt collection to the church bazaar. Got $200. You never used them anyway. We needed the money for the cottage repairs. The message was from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister. She'd always had a way of making decisions about my life without asking. But this time, she'd gone too far. I set my phone down on my desk at the studio and looked out at the Toronto skyline. The CN Tower gleamed in the afternoon sun. My corner office on the 40th floor of the financial district had floor-to-ceiling windows that most people would kill for. But my family didn't know about this office. They didn't know about any of it. To them, I was still Sarah Chen, the 28-year-old who'd dropped out of business school 7 years ago to waste time with fabric and thread. The disappointment of the family. The one who'd chosen textiles over a proper career in finance like my cousin Brandon. I picked up my phone again and typed back a single word. Okay. My assistant Emma knocked on my door. Sarah? The museum curator is here for your 2 o'clock. Give me 5 minutes, I said, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. I walked to my private washroom and splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I saw a woman who'd built something extraordinary from nothing. A woman whose textile designs were in the permanent collections of 3 major museums. A woman whose custom quilts sold for $50,000 to $70,000 each to collectors around the world. A woman whose family thought she was a struggling artist, living in a basement apartment, teaching kids how to sew at the community center. I'd let them think that. After years of them mocking my passion, comparing me unfavorably to Brandon with his Bay Street job and his BMW, I'd simply stopped correcting their assumptions. When I moved into my condo in Yorkville 3 years ago, I told them I was house-sitting for a friend. When I traveled to Paris for Fashion Week, I said I was visiting old-school friends. It was easier than dealing with their sudden interest in my success. Easier than watching them try to benefit from what they'd once called my silly hobby. But the quilts. Those quilts were different. My grandmother, Mei Lin, had made them over 40 years, starting when she first immigrated to Vancouver from Hong Kong in 1968. Each one told a story. Her first winter in Canada. The birth of my mother. Opening her first restaurant in Chinatown. My grandfather's death. My own birth. She'd left them to me. Specifically in her will, 2 years ago. Not to my mother. Not to Patricia. To me. Because she'd understood what they never had. That I didn't just like textiles. I loved them. I studied them. I honored them. And now Patricia had donated them to a church bazaar for $200. I took a deep breath and returned to my desk. The museum curator wanted to discuss featuring my work in their upcoming exhibition on contemporary Canadian textile artists. We talked for an hour about themes and presentation. She had no idea that inside, I was calculating exactly how to handle what came next. After she left, I made a phone call. Hartley and Associates, how may I direct your call? Jennifer Hartley, please. This is Sarah Chen. Jennifer had been my lawyer since I incorporated my studio 5 years ago. She was sharp, discreet, and understood exactly how the art world worked. Sarah, how's the museum exhibition planning going? It's going well, but I need your help with something else. Something personal. I explained the situation. The quilts. Patricia's text. What I needed her to do. Consider it done, Jennifer said. Give me 2 hours. Next, I called Marcus, my art dealer. I need you to find out who bought some quilts at St. Andrew's Church Bazaar in Oakville last weekend. Vintage pieces, Chinese-Canadian origin, circa 1970s to 2010s. On it. Give me an hour. Then I sat back and waited. My phone rang 40 minutes later. Marcus's voice was excited. Sarah, you're not going to believe this. The quilts were purchased by Dr. Eleanor Blackwood. She's a textile historian at the Royal Ontario Museum. She paid $200 for the entire collection at the bazaar, but here's the thing. She immediately recognized what she had. My heart started pounding. And? She called me this morning, actually. She's trying to track down the provenance. She thinks they might be the missing pieces from Mei Lin Chen's collection. The ones that were mentioned in that journal article about Chinese-Canadian immigrant textile art from 2019. I closed my eyes. That journal article had been written by a graduate student who'd interviewed my grandmother 6 months before she died. It had mentioned the personal quilt collection that Mei Lin had refused to sell or donate to museums, saying they were meant for family. Does Dr. Blackwood know their value? I asked. She's estimating between $450,000 to $600,000 for the complete collection, maybe more at auction. Sarah, if these are authentic Mei Lin Chen pieces, they're historically significant. The ROM would want them for their permanent collection. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, something calmer, more resolved. Marcus, can you set up a meeting with Dr. Blackwood tomorrow? Tell her the owner wants to discuss the collection. The owner? Sarah, I thought your aunt. My grandmother left them to me. They're mine. Patricia had no legal right to donate them. Oh, a pause. Oh, okay. Yes, I'll set it up. 20 minutes later, Jennifer called back. Done. I've sent a formal legal notice to Patricia Chen and to St. Andrew's Church. The quilts were donated without the owner's permission and the sale is void. I've also contacted Dr. Blackwood directly to inform her of the situation. She's already agreed to return them to you. Apparently, she's relieved. She was worried about the ethics of the acquisition anyway. Thank you, Jennifer. Sarah, are you going to tell your family? Eventually. But first, I'm going to let Patricia figure out what she's done. That evening, I received another text from Patricia. Some lawyer called me about those old quilts. This is ridiculous. They were just taking up space in the storage unit. You never even looked at them. I didn't respond. The next day, I met Dr. Blackwood at the ROM's Textile Conservation Facility. She was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and careful hands. Miss Chen, I'm so glad we could resolve this. The moment I saw these pieces, I knew they were special. Your grandmother was an artist. These quilts document a crucial period of Chinese-Canadian history that's often overlooked. She led me through the climate-controlled room, where the quilts were laid out on examination tables. I saw my grandmother's hands in every stitch, the tiny, precise needlework, the way she'd incorporated traditional Chinese patterns with Canadian imagery. Maple leaves rendered in red silk next to lotus flowers in gold thread. This one, Dr. Blackwood said, pointing to a large quilt featuring the Vancouver harbor. This is particularly significant. The level of detail, the way she's captured the fishing boats, and the mountains in the background. And look here, she's embroidered the date, March 1968. This would have been within weeks of her arrival in Canada. I touched the edge gently. She told me once that she made this quilt during her first spring here. She said she'd never seen mountains so close to the ocean. They reminded her of Hong Kong, but different. She wanted to capture that feeling of being between two worlds. That's exactly what this is, Dr. Blackwood said softly. It's a bridge between cultures, between memory and new experience. Miss Chen, I have to ask, would you ever consider allowing the ROM to display these? Not permanently, unless you wished, but for an exhibition? The story these quilts tell, it's important. It's part of Canadian history that needs to be preserved and shared. I thought about my grandmother, arriving in a country where she didn't speak the language, where people made assumptions about who she was and what she could contribute. I thought about how she'd built a life here anyway. A restaurant, a family, an art form that nobody recognized as art until after she was gone. I'd like to think about it, I said. But yes, I think she'd want people to see them. My phone buzzed. Another text from Patricia. The lawyer says the quilts are worth what? This is insane. Call me now. I put my phone away. That weekend, my family held their monthly dinner at my parents' house in Mississauga. I usually made excuses not to go, but this time I accepted the invitation. My mother opened the door, surprised to see me. Sarah, you came. We didn't think you would. You're always so busy with your sewing classes. Inside, the house smelled like my childhood, steamed fish and garlic green beans. My father was watching hockey in the living room. My Aunt Patricia was in the kitchen with my mother, and my cousin Brandon was on the couch with his phone. Sarah's here, my mother announced. Patricia, did you tell her about the lawyer nonsense? Patricia came out of the kitchen, her face tight. Sarah, we need to talk about these quilts. I don't know what game you're playing, but they weren't yours to donate, I said quietly. Grandma left them to me. They were in the family storage unit. Nobody was using them. That doesn't make them yours. Brandon looked up from his phone. What's going on? Your aunt donated some old quilts to a church sale, my mother said. Apparently, Sarah is upset about it. Upset? I almost laughed. Mom, those quilts are worth over $500,000. The room went silent. That's ridiculous, Patricia said. They were just old blankets. They were art. Museum-quality pieces by a recognized textile artist. Grandma's work has been featured in academic journals. There's a waiting list of collectors who want her pieces. My father muted the TV. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed them the email from Dr. Blackwood, with photographs of the quilts and the ROM's preliminary valuation. Brandon stood up to look at the screen. Holy shit. Language, my mother said automatically, but she was staring at the phone too. The Royal Ontario Museum wants to feature them in an upcoming exhibition on Chinese-Canadian immigrant art, I continued. They've already offered to purchase 3 pieces for their permanent collection. I'm considering it. Patricia's face had gone pale. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? You could have asked me. They were left to me specifically. You went into the storage unit without permission and took things that weren't yours. But you never even looked at them. You were just letting them sit there. I was having them properly stored while I researched the best way to preserve them. I've been working with conservationists for the past year. My mother sat down heavily. Sarah, I don't understand. How do you know all this? How can you afford conservationists? This was the moment I'd been avoiding for years. But it was time. I own a textile design studio in Toronto. In the financial district, I employ 12 people. My work is in museums in Canada, the US, and Europe. I make custom art quilts for private collectors. Each one sells for $50,000 to $70,000. I have a 2-year waiting list. Brandon's mouth was open. You're rich? I'm successful. There's a difference. My father spoke for the first time. Why didn't you tell us? Because 7 years ago, when I said I wanted to study textiles, you told me I was wasting my life. You said I should be practical like Brandon, that art was a hobby, not a career. So I stopped trying to explain. I built my business quietly, and I let you think whatever you wanted to think. But we're family, my mother said. We deserve to know. Do you? I looked at her, then at Patricia, then at my father. You deserve to know when you support me, not when you want something from me. For 7 years, nobody in this room asked about my work except to make jokes about it. Nobody came to my studio. Nobody asked to see what I was creating. You assumed I was failing because that's what you expected. Patricia sat down. I'm sorry. I really didn't know about the quilts. But Sarah, you have to understand. We needed money for the cottage repairs, and you thought they were worthless, so it didn't matter. That's the problem, Aunt Patricia. You didn't think they had value, so you didn't bother to check, just like none of you thought my career had value, so you didn't bother to look. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, my father spoke. What happens now? Now, I'm retrieving the quilts. Dr. Blackwood has already returned them to me. I'm having them professionally conserved and documented. Some will be loaned to museums. Some I'll keep private. And I'm establishing a foundation in Grandma's name to support young Chinese-Canadian artists working in traditional crafts. A foundation? Brandon asked. That's, like, serious money. Yes, it is. My mother's eyes were wet. Sarah, I'm sorry. We should have believed in you. You should have respected me. There's a difference between believing someone will succeed and respecting their choices even when you don't understand them. Patricia stood up suddenly. I'll pay you back. For the $200. And for any trouble I caused. I don't want your $200. I want you to understand that things don't have to look valuable to you to actually matter. Grandma's quilts told her story. They were her legacy. You almost threw that away because you couldn't see past their surface. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I softened slightly. I know you didn't do it maliciously, but you did it thoughtlessly. And that matters too. Dinner was awkward. Nobody knew quite what to say. Brandon asked careful questions about my business. My mother kept apologizing. My father was quiet, but I could see him looking at me differently. Seeing me differently. As I was leaving, my mother caught my arm. Can we see it? Your studio? Maybe. Eventually. If you're actually interested. We are. We really are. I nodded. Then we'll see. The following week, I met with Dr. Blackwood again. We signed an agreement for the ROM to display 6 of the quilts in their upcoming exhibition. I also agreed to loan them 2 pieces permanently, with the understanding that they would be credited to my grandmother's name and that educational materials would be developed about her work and her immigrant experience. The exhibition opened 3 months later. It was called Threading Stories. Chinese-Canadian Textile Art, 1968 to 2020. My grandmother's work was the centerpiece. My parents came to the opening. So did Patricia and Brandon. They stood in front of the Vancouver Harbor quilt for a long time, reading the description plaque that explained my grandmother's journey. Her courage. Her artistry. I never knew, my mother whispered. I saw her making these quilts my whole childhood. But I never really looked at them. I never understood what she was creating. She tried to show you, I said gently. She tried to show all of us, but we were too busy thinking about practical things, about money and careers, and what the neighbors would think. Patricia came up beside us. The plaque says she started the harbor quilt the week she arrived in Canada. She didn't even speak English yet, but she was already documenting her new life. That's incredible. She was incredible, I agreed. You're like her, my mother said suddenly. You inherited more than her quilts. You inherited her vision, her ability to see art where other people see ordinary things. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. Brandon appeared with a program. There's a whole section here about contemporary textile artists, influenced by traditional Chinese techniques. Sarah, you're mentioned. It says you're one of the leading voices in the field. I'm one of many voices, I corrected. There are a lot of artists doing important work in this space. But you're one of them. You're actually, legitimately important in this world, and we had no idea. You had no idea because you weren't looking, I said. It wasn't mean, just factual. That's okay, you can look now. My father had been standing silently in front of a quilt featuring the Toronto skyline that Grandma had made in the 1990s. She made this the year you were born, he said. See? She embroidered your birth date here in the corner. And there, that tiny figure on the CN tower. I think that's supposed to be you. She used to say you would climb higher than any of us. I hadn't noticed that detail before. I moved closer and saw he was right. There was a tiny figure, done in pink thread, at the top of the tower. She believed in me, I said softly, even when I was too little to believe in myself. And she left me these quilts, so I would remember that. So I would know that my work mattered, that art matters, that telling our stories matters. We stood there together, my imperfect family, looking at my grandmother's perfect stitches, learning to see what had been invisible to us before. Later that evening, after the reception ended, I walked through the empty exhibition space one more time. The quilts glowed under the museum lighting, each one a window into my grandmother's soul, her fears and hopes and dreams, rendered in fabric and thread. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Thank you for not hating me. And thank you for making sure Mom's legacy is preserved. I'm sorry I almost destroyed it. I'll do better. I wrote back. We all will. Because that was the truth. We were all learning. Learning to see value beyond price tags. Learning to respect paths we don't understand. Learning that success comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest voices are the most powerful. I took a photo of the Vancouver Harbor quilt and posted it to my studio's Instagram with a simple caption. My grandmother, Mei Lin Chen, came to Canada with nothing but courage and a needle. She built a life here. She built art here. She built a bridge between worlds. These are her stories, told in fabric. These are her lessons, stitched in silk. I'm honored to be her granddaughter. I'm honored to continue her work. The post got thousands of likes. But more importantly, it got comments from other artists, other immigrants, other people who'd been told their dreams were impractical, people who'd been underestimated, people who'd kept creating anyway. That's what Grandma had understood. That art isn't about making money, though money can follow. Art is about refusing to let your story be erased. It's about insisting that beauty and meaning matter, even when the world tells you to be practical. She'd taught me that. And now, finally, my family was learning it too. 3 months after the exhibition opened, I received a letter from the Canada Council for the Arts. I'd been selected for a major grant to establish the Mei Lin Chen Foundation for emerging Chinese-Canadian textile artists. The foundation would provide funding, mentorship, and exhibition opportunities for young artists working in traditional crafts. I called my mother to tell her. Grandma would be so proud, she said, crying. Sarah, I'm so proud. Thanks, Mom. Can I ask you something? Of course. Will you teach me? About textiles? About what you do? I want to understand. I want to really see it. The way you see it. I smiled. I'd like that. Because that's what this whole journey had been about. Not revenge, not proving them wrong, but creating space for understanding, for growth, for the possibility that people can learn to see differently. My Aunt Patricia donated $5,000 to the foundation. Brandon volunteered to help with social media and fundraising. My father framed a photo of Grandma's Vancouver Harbor quilt and hung it in his office. They were trying. That's all I'd ever wanted. The quilts remained at the ROM for 6 months, then traveled to exhibitions in Vancouver and Montreal. Everywhere they went, people stood in front of them and saw themselves, saw their own immigrant stories, saw their own struggles to be understood. And I kept creating. New quilts, new designs, new bridges between tradition and innovation. Because Grandma had taught me the most important lesson of all. Your work is valuable not because other people recognize it, but because it's true. Because it's yours. Because you poured your soul into it. And sometimes, if you're patient, the world catches up. Sometimes, if you're lucky, your family learns to see what was there all along. But even if they don't, you keep creating. You keep stitching your stories. You keep building your bridges. Because that's what artists do. We make visible the things others overlook. We give voice to the silent. We turn scraps of fabric into windows into the soul. And we teach the next generation that there are many ways to be successful. Many ways to matter. Many ways to leave a legacy. My grandmother left hers in silk and thread. I'm leaving mine in the artists I mentor, the foundations I build, the doors I open for others. That's worth more than any price tag. That's worth more than any amount of money. That's worth everything.